Hi everyone, and welcome to Griniflix Adventure 8. Today's video is going to be about the Nikon Z6 and continuing with putting Leica lenses on the Z6. Question actually did come up. So is there any difference between the actual image between the two sensors and the actual lens, being the Leica lens on the Z6 versus the same Leica lens on the M240? So that's what I'll do, is I'll put this is not a Leica lens, but that's a Leica lens. I'll put the Leica lenses, I've got 4 to try out: the 21, the 35, 21 2.8, 35 1.4, 50 1.4, and the 90 f2. So I'll put those lenses on the Z6, Nikon Z6, and also on the Leica M240P. Then we'll go into Lightroom and we'll see whether there's any markable difference, whatever. The only thing that could possibly make a difference, and that is the actual adapter. So depending on how much you spend on an adapter, you can get, I suppose, good adapters and bad adapters. The most critical component in an adapter is going to be the flange thickness and how well that is machined. If it's machined right, there shouldn't be any difference in the actual quality of the image from a lens perspective. There may be a difference in the sensor, but as long as the adapter is good, it should be okay. So we've got the Leica on the left and the Nikon Z6 on the right here, and we're using a 21mm lens and similar shutter speeds, apertures and ISOs. So let's have a look at side-by-side comparison. And as you would expect, the same lens on both cameras produces similar results. So I try to get the grayscales about right in both cases, so they're similar. But other than me focusing at slightly different points, I don't think there's any difference in the actual image. And of course there is a difference in sensor between the Leica M240 and the Z6, but otherwise from edge to edge it's pretty much the same. I think there's a difference here slightly because I focused at a different point in the image, but otherwise pretty much the same. Okay, let's go to the next lens. So that was a 21mm f2.8. Now let's go to the 35mm f1.4. so here we're shooting wide open actually, with all the lenses, to give you a comparison with the different sensors on the two different cameras. So again, the Leica on the left and the Nikon Z6 on the right. And again, you can see this is zoomed in at 2:1 on the image. Very similar shots as you would expect. So we'll go on to the 50mm, again shooting 1.4 in this case on both bodies, the Z6 on the right, the Leica on the left. Let's have a closer look. And here we can see, again, a very similar shot, if not the same, on both sides. And then the bokeh in the back and the detail in the front as we move towards the side of the image. And then the last lens, which was the 90mm at f2, and again side by side comparison, and we're getting pretty much the same again as you would expect. Well, there you go. So I guess the proof of the pudding is, yes, putting Leica lenses on the Z6 produces a very similar result as far as image quality is concerned. There's no difference in what the lens does. The only difference being, obviously, is the body itself and the sensor that's on the respective cameras. Now, the other advantage of using One of the main advantages of using the Z6 over the M240 is that there's in-body image stabilization on the Z6. So what I'll do is I'll do some shots, say with the 90mm lens at different shutter speeds on the Z6 and the M240, and just see what's the practical difference in standing steady and taking a shot and having the IBIS also. So you'll see that in the Lightroom photo comparison as well. Looking at the image, in-body image stabilization of the Z6, which is the photograph on the left, versus the Leica with the same lens, a 90mm Leica lens, with no image stabilization, both at 1/4 of a second. I'm pretty sure I'm shooting f/16 here. So side by side you can see the difference. You can see some camera shake there at 1/4 of a second, handheld, with the image stabilization on the Z6. So that's 1/8 of a second. That was 1/4 of a second. Let's have a look at 1/8 of a second, see what the difference is. Z6 here on the left, and the Leica on the right with no image stabilization at 1/8 of a second handheld. So let's see what it looks like at 1/15 of a second. So obviously I'm adjusting the aperture as we go, keeping in the same ISO. So now we're at 1/15 of a second. Z6 on the left and the Leica on the right, the M240. So it's starting to 1/15 of a second at 90mm. It's still, you can see the camera shake there. Let's see whether 1/30th of a second is better. Oh, still camera shake 1/30, actually 1/15. I was lucky with the 1/15. 1/30 ended up being worse on the Leica. Still pretty obviously clear on the Z6 with the image stabilization. Going on to 1/60th of a second, see whether I'm going to get better at that. You can see the Leica at 1/60th, there's still camera shake there, quite clear on the Z6. And 1/25 of a second, hopefully it's looking a bit better with the Leica. Looking a little bit better with the Leica, but a much clearer image still on the Z6 because of the camera shake on the Leica. Let's see what happens when we go to 2/50th of a second. 1/250th of a second. Side by side. Now we're getting a nice, clear, stable image with the handheld 90mm with the Leica on the right. And at 1/250th of a second, looking quite clear also on the left with the Z6. Well, I hope you found that interesting. I guess one thing to note with the in-body image stabilization on the Z6 is that you've got to tell the camera in the spanner set up in the menu what non-CPU lens you're using. Here you can see under the spanner non-CPU lens data, and when you press OK you can see I've got a whole bunch set up here. I've got three, so number 3 is 35mm 1.4, and the closest I could get to the 90mm was 85mm f2. And in this case here I've got a 35 Voigtlander on it. I'll just change that back to non-CPU lens number 3, which is for me it's 35 1.4. So that's all you have to remember to do on the Z6, is to change your non-CPU lens data on your camera, because as soon as you change that, it changes the amount of in-body image stabilization that occurs. So a 35mm lens gets less stabilization, or the dynamics is different, and a 85 or 95, 85, 90mm lens would get more stabilization as well. Anyway, hope this has been interesting. So definitely, as much as I love using the Leica M240, and I think I'll love using the Nikon Z6 as well with manual lenses on it, short manual lenses, because then it's just as small as the Leica, and I can set it up so it feels like a Leica even though it's not, with Leica lenses. And I love interchanging and using both cameras. So is the Z6 a good compromise or alternative to the Leica body using Leica lenses? I think so. Let me know what your thoughts are. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed this. Subscribe. You'll probably find some links somewhere, and press notifications. Love to get your comments, and we'll see you on the next video. Cheers.